let's kick things off. Joined here, of course, by Rolake Akinkunmi-Filani, host of Business Week. Rolake, there are so many things to discuss here in Davos. Of course, the main theme being the spirit of dialogue. And there are 5 key questions that are going to be asked of the leaders that are here. For anyone who may have missed it on our flagship morning show when we spoke to the crew there, take us through that. What are your thoughts on those 5 key questions and how those could be fleshed out this week?
Yeah, a really great thought and focus there. The 5 key questions are probably quite topical. The first one is, how do you build cooperation in a contested world? And, contested sounds really, like an understatement right now, against the backdrop of this sort of bilateralism in terms of trade. Then, of course, we're seeing the tariff wars. So we're moving towards a new type of global fragmentation. And in fact, according to estimates, world trade is now hovering around 2%, way below its pre-2018 levels. So how do you build cooperation when it seems like we're going in the other direction? That's the first question. The second one is really around, how do we unlock new sources of growth? Global growth, 3% last year. What will we see this year? And if we look at some of the big drivers of global growth, China has seen that slow down, and we haven't really seen that uptick in its economy with the housing crisis, some liquidity challenges, focusing now more on domestic consumption. And of course, the tariff wars are likely to start to see a trickle-down effect on growth in key economies, not just in the Northern Hemisphere, but in emerging markets and developing countries. And then the third one, which I think is a really interesting one, how do we invest better in people? There's an estimate that suggests that by 2030, over 1 billion people on Earth will need to upskill.
That's just 4 years from now.
Right. And, that's really interesting, Rotas, because it ties it nicely to the fourth question is, how do we deploy innovation, particularly AI, in a responsible way and scale it at the same time? We've got all these big tech CEOs coming to Davos and having those conversations. We know that AI by itself could add about $7 trillion to $10 trillion to the world economy by 2030. There needs to be a workforce to power that. I know we're often talking about AI sort of erasing jobs, but actually we need a new, highly skilled workforce to do that. And last but by no means least, one I think that I'm really passionate about is, how do you unlock prosperity amidst global fragmentation? And I think that's really key. When you look at climate change, it's one of the key drivers in terms of development in many global southern economies. So the issue of prosperity is so interlinked with so many other themes here at Davos in 2026, Rotas.
Well, Rolake, fantastic breakdown there. Thank you so much for taking us through those 5 key questions, and we'll see how they are answered. Another question that's being asked is President Trump and him looming over this forum this year. And basically, Rolake, does dialogue still work? When you think about the Venezuela tensions, Iran, and the others around Greenland, is dialogue still effective?
Well, the thing is, there's a new approach with dialogue, which is being led by figures like Trump. The idea is to force you to dialogue. We force you to the negotiating table by taking highly punitive measures. So we're seeing it with the trade tariffs. We're seeing it with the Greenland dispute, right? Impose 10% tariffs, escalate to 25% by the 1st of June if there's no negotiation. Now, the question is whether Davos provides enough of a platform for those hard-hitting types of dialogues that deliver outcomes and positive results to take place. So the spirit of dialogue sounds very ironic, right? We see the themes of previous years, rebuilding trust, collaborating in the age of intelligence, but I think it's more pertinent than ever. So it's a necessity. Talk needs to happen, hopefully followed by action.
Speaking of talk, Trump is coming here to talk about affordable housing in the United States. I don't know, I want to get your thoughts. What do you think about bringing a domestic issue to an international audience?
Well, that's interesting because I see a hidden thread here, because what he's focusing on here is capital and the investment environment. So it's no longer just a domestic issue for Trump. And if you think about the housing crisis as a proxy for investor sentiment on the US economy, then you start to understand why he's bringing what seems like a domestic agenda and bringing it to the international platform like Davos. But the other thing that I think is quite interesting is America is now really depending on fiscal structures rather than productivity to keep growth going. So beyond the Greenland dispute, beyond the issue, the geopolitical issues, the US administration needs to have other types of conversations questions here because the housing crisis is tied to credit, it's tied to interest rates that might ultimately link to monetary policy and what the Fed will do coming into the transition in Fed leadership, right, in 2026.
Which Trump is trying to influence?
Yes, so no surprises that the affordability crisis is on the table.
Yeah. Okay, now, to take you back to whether or not dialogue works for the cynics out there, because there are a number of folks who've felt a bit cynical about the theme for this year with everything that's going on. I mean, the counterpoint I want you to get your thoughts on that is, okay, if dialogue doesn't work, then what? Do countries just fight against each other? What is the alternative to dialogue if not that? Okay,
well, let's break down the issues. Yeah. So the hot topic right now is Greenland, right? The U.S. administration has said we're going to impose tariffs on Germany, France, the UK. President Macron has waded in and has actually called his allies within NATO to exercise a coercive instrument to really retaliate against the Trump administration. But like I said, it's meant to force dialogue. So this could be the catalyst that then sets off a string of conversations around the Greenland dispute and the plan for acquisition of Greenland or annexation, however you see it. Yeah. So, we're not talking anything apocalyptic like World War III. I think that's probably quite extreme. But what this forces all parties to think about is what tools and levers do we have to sort of find a middle ground. Now, whether the Trump administration is able to find a middle ground with anyone, considering this is such a major legacy issue, it seems like, for Donald Trump, remains to be seen. But hopefully, with heads locked together, you have different blocs. NATO as an alliance needs to stay strong. This is the biggest fracture we're seeing in the NATO alliance in decades. And all of this is squarely on the Davos agenda. So I do hope we will see an easing of those tariff measures that the U.S. administration has imposed.
We'll see. And Mark Rutte is here, Secretary General of NATO. So looking forward to his comments. Let's bring it to Nigeria. The Nigeria delegation is here. Vice President Kashim Shettima, Finance Minister Wale Edu, Minister of Trade and Investment Dr. Jumoke Oduwole. Vice President Shettima of Nigeria will be flagging off the Nigeria House.
Yes.
I wanted to get your thoughts on that move, which will be happening later on today.
Yeah, the Nigeria House, as many people may have realized, is the first time Nigeria is having a Nigeria House. And interestingly, I think this should not be missed, is the fact that if you go on the promenade here at Davos, the Nigeria House is right amidst all the houses of all the other global superpowers. Yeah. Is this a return of Nigeria to the global table in terms of economic diplomacy? I think what this will mean for Nigeria is, are investors going to validate all the economic reforms we've seen so far, which we've dialogued about back home? Yeah. This will be the true test of how the market and global investors truly see the government's economic reform. And the other interesting thing is that the Minister for Industry, Trade and Investment, Dr. Jumoke Oduwole, will be unveiling for the first time something called the Investors Playbook.
Hey, okay.
It's really exciting. It's a way of saying Nigeria is once again open for business. And actually, if you think about the backdrop of everything we talked about, Nigeria is suddenly saying, let us be the voice for Africa. Let's actually reimagine what an open economy that reaches out across the aisle, that reaches out to dialogue with partners, that seeks to attract global capital, and that seeks a new type of dialogue, a new spirit of dialogue, leveraging what we've done back home, which is all this domestic macroeconomic reforms, and bring that and showcase that on the international stage. And hopefully we go away with some concrete deals back home, and investment pacts that will benefit the people back home.
Less than a minute to go. Looking at what Nigeria gets out of Davos, is that the number one thing, the investments, or is it also forging better partnerships with
I think it's a bit of both, right? We need action, but visibility is so important in global economic diplomacy. If you're not showing up and being seen, then you don't exist. Right? And we've been talking about a rebalancing and shift in global capital flows. So we shouldn't underestimate the impact of being present and in a strategic location, even physically, on the promenade. So we're very hopeful. We're cautiously optimistic about the global push for alliances. But I think Nigeria hopefully will bring back some results.
Rolake, great stuff. Thank you so much for the breakdown there. Rolake, I can't feeling. Of course, we're going to be here all week.
Indeed, we are.
All week, giving up updates from the World Economic Forum here in Davos, Switzerland.